As Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters carved through the European skies in 1940, their pilots faced an invisible enemy they could never identify. It wasn't the Browning machine guns of the Spitfires or the skill of RAF pilots that defeated them at extreme altitudes. It was something far more subtle, something that flowed silently through tubes and valves within British cockpits. Luftwaffe pilots, veterans of hundreds of combat missions, never suspected they were losing a technological war fought at the most basic level of human survival, breathing itself. While they struggled with hypoxia and fatigue at altitudes above 25,000 feet, their British adversaries breathed with the efficiency of Olympic athletes, maintaining sharp reflexes and precise aim when it mattered most. This technological disparity, hidden within the aircraft's oxygen systems, would shape the fate of entire battles without a single Luftwaffe pilot truly understanding why their opponents seemed superhuman in the rarefied air of high altitudes, as thin as that of a Himalayan mountain. The Spitfire's Diluter-Demand oxygen system represented a silent revolution in military aviation. Unlike the primitive continuous flow systems used by the Germans, which wasted precious oxygen by pumping a constant stream regardless of the pilot's breathing, the British system functioned like an intelligent mechanical lung. Each inhalation by the pilot activated a demand valve that released a precisely calibrated mixture of pure oxygen and ambient air, automatically adjusted according to altitude. The ingenuity lay in the details. Barometric sensors detected pressure changes and adjusted the oxygen concentration in real time, ensuring the pilot received exactly what was needed, when it was needed. This technology, developed in secret British laboratories, allowed a Spitfire to carry enough oxygen supply for 3-hour missions at extreme altitudes, while a Bf 109 with a conventional system depleted its reserves in just 90 minutes. British pilots could remain alert and combative at altitudes where their German opponents began to experience the first debilitating symptoms of oxygen deprivation. Hans Müller, a veteran Luftwaffe pilot with 43 confirmed victories, described an experience in his diary that haunted him throughout the war. In September of 1940, during an interception over the English Channel at 30,000 feet, he found himself in direct combat with a Spitfire MKII. "My vision began to darken at the edges," Müller wrote. "My reflexes were slow as if I were submerged in thick honey, but the British pilot. He maneuvered as if he were flying at 5,000 feet, with surgical precision and relentless aggression." Müller couldn't understand how his opponent maintained such acuity at an altitude that left him dizzy and disoriented. What he didn't know was that, while his continuous flow system had wasted 70% of the available oxygen in the first 20 minutes of flight, the British pilot was still operating with full reserves and blood oxygen concentration close to sea-level readings. This physiological advantage translated into absolute tactical superiority, faster reaction times, more accurate aim, and the ability to sustain high-G maneuvers that would render a hypoxic pilot unconscious. The difference between the systems became even more pronounced during prolonged engagements. The German continuous flow system operated like an open tap, releasing approximately 4 liters of oxygen per minute, regardless of the pilot's physiological needs. In contrast, the British Diluter-Demand system consumed only 1.5 liters per minute during normal breathing, automatically increasing to 3 liters during intense physical exertion or high-G maneuvers. This efficiency was not just a matter of resource conservation, but of tactical survival. RAF pilots reported that they could maintain mental clarity and fine motor coordination at altitudes where they observed their German opponents flying erratically, with imprecise maneuvers that betrayed the effects of hypoxia. Flight Lieutenant James "Ginger" Lacey, an RAF ace with 28 victories, observed that the Germans seemed drunk above 25,000 feet, as if they were fighting an invisible enemy inside their own cockpits. Lacey was more right than he knew. His opponents truly were fighting an invisible enemy, the gradual oxygen deprivation that compromised their cognitive and motor functions. The physiological effects of this technological disparity were devastating for German pilots. Hypoxia, a condition caused by insufficient oxygen in the blood, initially manifests through subtle symptoms: inappropriate euphoria, a false sense of well-being, and decreased judgment. Luftwaffe pilots frequently reported feelings of invincibility at high altitudes, followed by periods of confusion and spatial disorientation. Dr. Heinrich Strughold, a German aerospace physician, documented that pilots operating above 25,000 feet with continuous flow systems experienced a 20 to 30% reduction in visual acuity and 50% slower reaction times after just 15 minutes of exposure. Meanwhile, British tests showed that pilots using diluter-demand systems maintained 95% of their cognitive capabilities even after 2 hours of flight at extreme altitudes. This advantage translated into measurable tactical superiority. RAF pilots could detect enemy aircraft at greater distances, execute more precise defensive maneuvers, and maintain effective targeting during prolonged bursts of fire. Diluter-demand technology had been secretly developed by the British Oxygen Company in partnership with the Royal Aircraft Establishment during the late 1930s. British engineers, anticipating the need for high-altitude combat, created a system that worked through a pressure-sensitive diaphragm connected to a pneumatic demand valve. When the pilot inhaled, the pressure drop in the system activated the valve, releasing a precise dose of oxygen mixed with filtered air. The system also included an automatic altitude regulator that progressively increased oxygen concentration as the aircraft climbed, maintaining the pilot's blood saturation at optimal levels. This technology represented an evolutionary leap comparable to the difference between a primitive carburetor and a modern electronic fuel injection system. The Germans, confident in the superiority of their aircraft and the skill of their pilots, never suspected they were being outmatched by an innovation as fundamental as it was revolutionary. They attributed their difficulties at high altitudes to British numerical superiority or more aggressive defensive tactics, never imagining that the answer lay literally in the air they breathed. The strategic impact of this technological advantage manifested most dramatically during the Battle of Britain. German bomber formations, escorted by Bf-109s, frequently flew at altitudes between 25 and 30,000 feet to avoid interception. However, Spitfires could not only reach these altitudes but operate with lethal efficiency, while their opponents struggled against the debilitating effects of hypoxia. Combat statistics reveal a striking disparity. In engagements above 25,000 feet, the Spitfire's victory rate over Bf-109s was 3-1, compared to a nearly balanced rate at lower altitudes. This high-altitude superiority forced the Luftwaffe to modify its tactics, opting for attacks at lower altitudes where the advantage of the British oxygen system was less pronounced. Ironically, this tactical shift exposed German bombers to a greater concentration of defending fighters and anti-aircraft artillery, contributing significantly to the failure of the German air campaign over England. German commanders interpreted this need to fly lower as a clever tactical adaptation, without realizing they were being forced to abandon the advantage of altitude due to a fundamental technological deficiency. Reports from captured pilots reveal the extent of German confusion regarding this performance disparity. Hauptmann Friedrich Fritz Lassigkeit, a Luftwaffe ace with 31 victories, was shot down over Kent in October of 1940 after a high-altitude combat. During his interrogation, Lassigkeit expressed genuine bewilderment. The British pilots seemed immune to the effects of altitude. They maintained perfect formation and executed complex maneuvers at altitudes where our own pilots could barely maintain level flight. Lassigkeit described how, during the combat, he had experienced severe tunnel vision and spatial disorientation, while his British opponent demonstrated precision and aggression that seemed superhuman. The British interrogator, aware of the technological advantage but instructed to maintain secrecy, simply noted that the German pilot attributed British superiority to superior high-altitude training. This erroneous interpretation spread through the German pilot community, leading to training changes that could never compensate for a fundamental technological deficiency. The Germans intensified high-altitude flight exercises and breathing techniques, without realizing they were trying to solve an engineering problem with inadequate physiological solutions. The irony of this technological situation deepens when we consider that Germany possessed some of the most advanced aerospace medicine laboratories in the world. The Institute for Aviation Medicine in Berlin, directed by Dr. Hubertus Strughold, conducted pioneering research on the effects of altitude on human performance. However, their studies focused primarily on physiological adaptation and pilot training, not on the development of more efficient life support systems. German scientists knew that hypoxia was a significant problem, but they approached the issue through rigorous pilot selection and intensive physical conditioning, rather than technological innovation. Meanwhile, the British had opted for an engineering approach, developing technology that compensated for human limitations instead of trying to overcome them through training. This philosophical difference in problem-solving reflected distinct national mindsets. The Germans relied on individual superiority and physical conditioning, while the British bet on technological innovation and systemic efficiency. The result was a tactical advantage that the Germans could never identify, much less neutralize. The secret of the Diluter-Demand system was successfully kept throughout the war, protected by layers of compartmentalization and disinformation. RAF pilots were instructed never to discuss technical details of their oxygen systems, even among themselves. Technical manuals were classified as top secret and kept under armed guard. When British aircraft were shot down in enemy territory, special recovery teams had priority orders to destroy or retrieve the oxygen systems before they could be examined by the Germans. This security operation was so effective that, even after the war, many Luftwaffe veterans remained ignorant of the true reason for their high-altitude inferiority. In their post-war memoirs, German pilots continued to attribute British high-altitude superiority to factors such as superior training, better tactical coordination, or the aerodynamic characteristics of the Spitfires. The truth about the Diluter-Demand system only became widely known decades after the conflict, when classified documents were released and British veterans could finally reveal the secret that had helped save Great Britain. This belated revelation demonstrates how seemingly simple technological advantages can have profound strategic impacts, remaining hidden even from experienced observers and competent military analysts. The lasting impact of this hidden technological advantage extended far beyond World War II, influencing the development of life support systems in military and civilian aircraft for decades. The Diluter-Demand principle became a universal standard in aviation, later adapted for jet aircraft, spacecraft, and deep-sea diving equipment. The fundamental lesson remains relevant. In high-tech conflicts, seemingly minor advantages can determine the outcome of entire battles. The Luftwaffe pilots, skilled and courageous veterans, were defeated not by a lack of competence or bravery, but by a technological innovation they could never detect. They fought bravely against an enemy that breathed better, thought more clearly, and reacted more quickly at altitudes where the air became as thin as in the world's highest mountains. This story serves as a reminder that, in modern warfare, victory often belongs not to the bravest or most skilled, but to those who can transform science into tactical advantage, breath by breath, battle by battle.